What is up everyone, and welcome back to another video. So as you probably know, having good settings in Fortnite is one of the most important things you can do in order to maximize your skill level. You can use all the best practice methods, grind the game non-stop, but if your settings suck, then you're probably still going to suck at the game. And that's why in today's video we'll be honing in specifically on keybinds, and I'll be giving you guys the best keybinds to use in Fortnite Chapter 3 Season 3 and in future seasons. These are going to apply whether you're a total beginner, whether you're switching to mouse and keyboard, or just a regular player looking to optimize your settings. Before we get into it though, be sure to drop a like on the video if it helps you out, and consider subscribing as well if you want to see more content just like this in the future. Also guys, if you haven't heard yet, I'm actually offering private one-on-one coaching now, so if that's something you're interested in, I'll put a link near the top of the description to the application. That way you can sign up if you want to get started. Obviously guys, coaching costs money, but my videos will always be free since my main goal is to help as many people improve as possible. But if you do want some specific one-on-one help, then that's a good option. And finally guys, if you want to show some extra support, consider using code TECHO in the item shop, as it's 100% free and it seriously helps your boy out a ton. Thank you so much to everyone who's using it, of course. But with that said, and without further ado, let's get into today's video. So starting off this video, we're going to begin by going over the Keybind Checklist. What I mean by Keybind Checklist is basically just a set of general standards for your keybinds, which you should try to match if you're trying to make them effective. I will be getting into some specific sets of keybinds later on in the video, but I do think you guys can benefit a lot from having more background on why certain keybinds are more effective than others. The first aspect on this keybinds checklist is something called finger spreading. This term basically refers to the amount of work each one of your fingers has to put in for the basic functions such as building, editing, and switching between your weapons. As you might expect, having most of your actions assigned to one finger is going to cause that finger to get super fatigued, and that's going to result in your mechanics being way slower and your overall gameplay struggling. So when it comes to optimal settings, your goal should basically be to have each finger you can use for building and editing have one or two actions assigned to it. It's a very simple concept, but you'd be really surprised by how many players are running around pressing 3 or even 4 different build binds with the same exact finger, and then they wonder why they're not able to keep up mechanically. The second aspect of the keybinds checklist is something that many players seem to do incorrectly, and that's utilizing your mouse buttons. When it comes to keybinds, the buttons on the side of your mouse are some of the fastest to reach binds and serve incredibly well for placing builds. Pretty much any good set of keybinds is going to involve your side mouse button, specifically for 2 out of the 4 building binds. Not only that, but your mouse wheel can also be used for scroll wheel reset, which is obviously really helpful. And as I'll be getting into later, I actually like to press the scroll wheel to reload, which is an option on a fair amount of mice. Overall though, if you don't have a mouse with side buttons, that's an investment I would definitely recommend making. Although you can still have good keybinds without them, and one set I discuss later on is actually going to account for that, side mouse buttons are definitely an important factor if you're trying to get the best set of keybinds possible. Third up on our list though, and we've got a pretty common sense factor that's super important nonetheless, and that's distance to WASD. This concept is super simple. Basically, you want your keybinds on your keyboard to be close to your movement binds, which are WASD for the vast majority of players. By having to move your fingers less between each bind, it's going to be a lot easier for you to hit each button quickly, and overall this is just going to help your mechanics a ton. Typically, the furthest that I would go away from my keybinds is probably about 2 keys down. So that would mean nothing past R, G, V for the most part. There are some exceptions to that rule. For example, thumb binds can go a bit further, and your number binds to select heals can also be a bit far since they're not super commonly used. But when it comes to the binds that you constantly use in close quarters fights, you're definitely going to want to make sure that those are close to WASD. Moving on to our fourth and final piece of this checklist, and this is going to be comfort. The fact of the matter is that everyone is different, and your preferences are going to be different from mine, different from your friends, and different from your favorite pros. So although I recommend trying new things based on what other people do, keep in mind that the most optimal keybinds are only optimal if you're comfortable and confident using them. So if you have a set of keybinds that allows you to have crazy mechanics, you feel good using those binds, and you don't feel the same way about more optimal sets of keybinds, then there's nothing wrong with sticking to those, because in the grand scheme of things, your keybinds don't have to be perfect to work. Overall though, if you can get a comfortable set of keybinds that fits at least 2 and preferably all 3 of the other factors, you should be in a really good spot. So moving on to the next part of today's video, what we're going to be doing is going over some specific sets of keybinds that you should try out in Fortnite. I'll be going over a handful of different sets and discussing what the pros and cons are of each one, so hopefully this gives you all a good idea as to what you might want to try. So getting into our first set of keybinds, we'll be going over one that has pretty much everything you could possibly ask for. In my opinion, it's basically the classic optimal keybind setup and should serve most of you really well. For these keybinds, you'll be using a side mouse button for your wall, Q for your floor, another side mouse button for your ramp. You'll be using left shift for cone, tab for trap, and E for edit. This set of keybinds fits the entire checklist. It only uses binds that are close to WASD. It uses no more than 1 finger per keyboard bind aside from cone and trap, but that's fine since trap isn't a super common bind regardless. And overall, it's just a really well-rounded set of keybinds. Also, another option for this set of keybinds is instead to use V for floor, which you'd press with your thumb rather than Q. It really just comes down to preference, but I find that some players prefer thumb binds, although it's really, once again, all preference. I just figured I would mention that since it can be helpful for some of you. Moving on from that though, our next set of keybinds is going to be one that includes no mouse buttons at all. I know that some of you don't have side mouse buttons, and although they're definitely helpful and I would recommend you get a mouse that has them, they also aren't 100% required for good keybinds. So this set of keybinds is going to include Q for wall, V for floor, which you're hopefully going to press with your thumb. Then it'll have F for ramp, left shift for cone, tab for trap, and E for edit. This gives you a really good set of keybinds that doesn't require you to use mouse buttons at all. You also have the option to sub out the floor bind V and use C instead, but I do find that V puts your hand in a little bit of a better position. Ultimately though, that's once again just up to whatever you feel best with. On to our third and final set of keybinds for this video though, and this one is going to be a set that hinders movement a little bit more than the others, but it also allows for crazy fast building and editing. This is going to start off with a mouse button for your wall. It's going to have F for your floor, another mouse button for your ramp, Q for your cone, left shift for trap, and that's going to leave your E bind for editing as well. This set of keybinds is absolutely incredible for mechanics, and the only real downside in my opinion is the fact that your index finger is used for both your floor and edit bind. But if you're able to adjust to that, that can definitely make for a really good set of keybinds. With that said, guys, moving into the last part of today's video, and the last thing we're going to be doing is discussing some of the other keybinds that you're going to want to be using aside from building and editing. Obviously, that's the majority of the keybinds that most people are probably watching this video for, but the other keybinds do serve really important purposes as well, so I figured I'd cover them. The first keybind I want to mention in this section is Tactical Sprint. As you probably know by this point, tactical sprinting is basically just sprinting but with a cooldown, and it makes you extra fast. The bind that I personally use for tactical sprint is T, but you can pretty much use any bind that you don't use otherwise and that's relatively close to WASD. It doesn't have to be as close as your building and editing binds, but it should be close enough where you don't have to struggle to use it. Some of the most common options I see for this are T, R, Alt, and B. Basically, they don't have to be super easy to hit, but they shouldn't be far either. On from that though, and the next group of keybinds to think about is going to be your weapon binds. Now, weapon binds are pretty straightforward in my opinion. What I recommend doing for this is simply to have number 1 for your pickaxe, and then you're going to have numbers 2 through 6 for the rest of your weapon slots. It's super straightforward, guys, and as long as you hold heals and utilities in your last 2 slots, it really won't require much reaching to hit any of those keybinds. Now, as well as that, you do have the option to take some of those binds and replace them with any reasonably close binds you're not using yet. For example, personally, I use C and R for my final 2 slots, which I usually carry heals and utilities in. This is mainly because 5 and 6 are a bit too far for comfort in my opinion, and I also have those binds left over, so I might as well use them for something. That's another set of binds that really just comes down to preference though. Finally, guys, the last keybind to consider is going to be your reload bind. Much like the tactical sprint bind, this is something that you should be able to reach relatively easily, but doesn't have to be a super quick bind like building and editing do. I personally think that the best option for this bind, if your mouse allows for it, is to simply press your scroll wheel in order to reload. Not all mice are actually going to apply an action to using the mouse wheel, but I use the Logitech G Pro wireless mouse and it does allow that. If your mouse doesn't allow for that, then another option is to simply scroll to reload. Obviously, if you do scroll wheel reset, then you're going to want to go in the opposite direction from that to reload. And if you don't like either of those 2 options, then I'd recommend just using a relatively easy to reach keyboard bind. The top options for this bind will be really similar to those of tactical sprint, basically the most common ones being T, R, Alt, B, and any other binds that you have left over that are easy to reach. But with all that said, guys, that's going to wrap it up for today's video on the best keybinds for keyboard and mouse in Fortnite Chapter 3 Season 3 and future seasons. Overall, after watching this entire video, you should have all your binds set up, or you should just have some really good ideas as to how you can approach it. If you found this video helpful, then be sure to drop a like on it and consider subscribing as well if you want to see more content just like this in the future. As well as that, consider using code TECHO in the item shop as it's 100% free and it seriously helps your boy out a ton. And lastly, guys, if you're interested in doing personalized one-on-one coaching directly with me, then the application to that is going to be linked at the top of the description. And if you guys have any video ideas that you want to see in the near future, definitely let me know about those in the comments and there's a fair chance that I'll do them. With that said though, thank you all for watching this video and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye for now.